actually go and get their x-rays, and then they go to the clinic and the clinic doesn't even know how to give them the x-rays. And then once they somehow have it, the patient doesn't even know how to transfer it to us. And then, so it just breaks everywhere, but that doesn't mean it's not important. And that also doesn't mean that we shouldn't all, keep talking about it and work on finding a solution so that accessibility of data is a non-issue anymore, hopefully in the future.
But your solution is creating own solutions and kind of finding workarounds. I recently heard there's a lot of talk about missing standards, especially in Germany. I also got the impression that in other countries it might be solved in a different way. And the topic of missing standards has been kind of following me around for quite a while now, because again, they're always like, they have to come together in many ways. It looks like in research, that topic has been kind of covered a little bit better. And I think you, Johannes, have been very active in research before, being at Charité for quite a while and, moving into the entrepreneurial field. I think, many different sides of how to actually find workarounds, but also what is coming up and what might be a solution to actually get access to data. Any tips? You're on mute. You're on mute.
Okay, now very good.
Yes.
Okay, so the answer has two sides. Number one, even at single healthcare institutions in Germany, so not, you don't even have to look globally, but even at single healthcare institutions, there are a lot of different systems in place that store healthcare, that record and store healthcare data. And even this data is not interoperable in the first place, right? So, and it's in a lot of healthcare institutions where you have different systems that store data, the data has to be like manually extracted, manipulated to actually make it work together, right? So to create big data in a single healthcare institution. And on the other hand, the data that is recorded outside the healthcare system by apps that you install on your smartphone, or by apps, by your smartphones as such, by applications that are not initially targeted at recording healthcare data, like your location data and things like that, is usually siloed in the application itself, right? So if you have one healthcare application stored on your phone, the data typically stays in there, right? So one thing that is going to come up that will maybe change this, especially when it comes to smartphone applications in Germany, is the DiGA Verordnung, right? So in Germany, by the end of last year, there was the DVG legislation that actually set the path for digital health applications being prescribable by the physician to a patient, and with a reimbursement path from insurance companies. And one prerequisite for actually becoming a DiGA, like an application that can then be prescribed so that you as a manufacturer can enter this reimbursement path. And one prerequisite is interoperability, right? So that your data, that the patient's data can actually be exported or communicated from the application to the patient, to another system using standards. So there are standards, and so standards exist, right? Both for describing data and for communicating it. They're just not used in a broad context yet, right?
I think in one of the last data natives, we also talked a little bit about colonialization of data, like who has the right for data, who owns data, who's naturally collecting data. Because I think there's also a shift. Who owned and had access to the data years ago, and you mentioned it already, Johannes. Now with digital solutions, the role of the patient is changing, and the role of the patient, the role of the entrepreneur, of the startup in the middle, but also the role of the bigger corporations that don't own the data anymore. They are not kind of the only source of data and the access. And I get the impression that it's more important than ever to collaborate together. And I think this is also something that you, Dominic, are focusing on, because you always wonder there's a patient, cool, there's a health insurance company, interesting. But in between, it's still not clear how the data goes from A to B, even if you know that data exists. Is that role changing, like from a pharma perspective? Because I think you worked in pharma a lot. I always got the impression that the larger companies have a little bit more power in terms of accessibility of data.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah. Also to give a bit of context, actually, before joining Flying Health, I was working on a startup that was trying exactly that, used patient data and tried to make sense out of these patient data and use it for post-marketing studies together with pharma companies. So, and I mean, to answer your question, the first thing that is currently the case and needs to remain the case, the data belongs to the patient. I think that's the first rule. And in certain cases, for example, as part of clinical studies, patients can give the right to these data to hospitals. And then hospitals can then collaborate with pharma companies for research purposes to use these data in a broader context. And there we already have the complexity of the healthcare system, so that when you have solutions, you need to provide a value first to the patient, then to the hospital or to the HCP in general, and then to the pharma company. So, and this is kind of one of the narratives that I think I've seen a lot with digital health companies that are focusing on data generation. They really need to think about providing this value for each of the stakeholders in the healthcare system. And whether it's, yeah, I think the interoperability between these systems is changing. And one reason for that is that more and more, I think when we talk about data, we also need to talk about what kind of data. So we do have this like very large data pools, and some of them, for some things, actually, we have quite an abundance of data. But when we talk about structured data, it becomes very different. So we have very raw data, but in order to make something out of these data for pharma companies, for research purposes, they need to be structured. And I think we've seen a lot of digital health startups that work exactly there to structure data, because otherwise you could just basically digitalize and scan data that are available already on the hospitals, but of course nobody wants to do that. So,
do you get the impression that sharing data or the willingness to share data across the different players became easier due to the forced situation we had in the previous months? I still remember it when I went to the doctors and my doctor said, "Oh, you need a test done, but we don't want you to go to 5 different specialists. Telemedicine is not working." So I suddenly start to trust old data that another doctor provided, because we have a lot of situations where redundant patient tests are done because the data is not shared properly, and suddenly to limit the burden on the healthcare system, it became easier to do telemedicine, to share patient data digitally. Is that a breakthrough in many ways? Did it open a stronger awareness of sharing data because you're forced to share because the physical tests might be limited?
Yeah, so I mean, I think in general, we've seen, of course, a huge uptake of telemedicine due to the corona crisis, and we always see now that the crisis actually has some kind of catalyst for the healthcare system. So in many ways, that has a positive effect of the digitalization of the healthcare system in Germany. What we expected a year ago would happen in 5 or 7 years is suddenly all happening within 1 or 2 years. So this is pushing, and I think it comes, of course, you always have, when it comes to data rights, you always have the balance between what people think is absolutely necessary towards how willing they are to share their data. When they believe the services of immediate necessary value to them, they're more willing to share the data than when they have options kind of in the real world to just go to the doctor, of course, especially in the healthcare system when we talk about data privacy, it is still an issue. And I think because this has been so quick, this crisis, and so sudden, and the data privacy issue, which is in Germany always a huge discussion, is a bit in the background, but I think we will see that coming up again. So when we talk about the uptake of telemedicine, I think in the next 1 or 2 years, we will see a lot of data privacy discussions coming up again. In general, I think the willingness of patients to share, it's not really sharing the data, it's more, you need to separate between using digital tools in healthcare doesn't always mean to share your data. I mean, there's the idea, for example, of the electronic patient record that's being introduced in Germany now to also allow patients to share their data for research purposes. At the moment, I think in Germany, we still see quite a lot of skepticism towards sharing data. We have big discussions with Facebook about all kinds of data rights, and I believe it will be more in the healthcare field.
Is there a big difference if you see the international markets, Sophie? You know, different behavior, different kind of way to do it?
So generally, yes and no. So every healthcare system has its own ins and outs, and there are countries who are slightly better in being able to collect and share data for patients, and some countries who are not. So I'm thinking of the Nordics, for example. They have systems in place where data is slightly more accessible than what we see here in Germany or in the US. But I think generally the discussion around data is not just if data is accessible, but also if you can actually get enough data in a meaningful way. So for a patient, just to make it quite clear, it doesn't help to just have access to your X-rays. You need access to your X-rays and your lab results and your post-op report from another place to be able to make meaningful use out of your own data, right? And I think that's sometimes forgotten about when we talk about kind of data accessibility. It's not just like, how do I get the data, but how can you actually facilitate to pull it together so it can be meaningfully used, either by kind of the owner of the data, the patient himself, or the healthcare provider or anyone else. And I think when we look at it from this perspective, we are just very far away from a point where it's actually consumerable, meaning embedded into the day-to-day of everyone, so that this is not an issue anymore, if that makes sense.
What do you think has to change? Because especially in the past weeks, we heard a lot about also doctors and physicians and people that are not that exposed to data and data solutions having a very hard time suddenly using data, refusing digital solutions in many ways, because it's the unknown. Like, what do we have to do to actually create a more open environment? Because again, you have access to data, you create, let's say, a digital solution that is very powerful. And as you said, it still has to be integrated in the traditional work life and the processes that are currently happening, in a GP praxis or, in a hospital, because it looks like there are different worlds that they come together, but how can we bridge these gaps?
I think you're asking the question that everyone is trying to solve right now. And I quite honestly, I don't think there's this one answer to that question. I think, and that's why it's so difficult, and that's why it's so complex, because there's not one easy answer to say we have to solve this and then it's done. I think the problems are historically grown and built and has many facets to it, and it starts with kind of the where does the data come from? So how do we collect data so that it actually has a level of data quality, so it's actually useful. So it starts from where does the data come from and how standardized is the data so that we can do something with it, to where is the data stored and how is it processed and how can it be made accessible again. And this is about definitions and data standards and interfaces and things like these. And then you have okay, and now who owns the data and who protects the data? And I think this is kind of, especially here in Germany, the big kind of fear factor, which, many opinions are out there, but I think this is and that has more to do with the regulatory and the policy environment that is still kind of unclear. And then also the last question is like, so, and then who can use the data and how do we want to use the data, and who has access to it and who can see it when. So I think, when we talk about especially healthcare data, there are just a lot of, I think that the devil is in the detail, and therefore there's just unfortunately not one single good answer. I think we have to like solve every step of the way. And I know a lot of people are working on solving either, you know, a lot in an integrated way or sections of this. So I'm, you know, I'd like to be quite bullish for the next few years to see solutions come out there that make it easier. But yeah, the long answer or the short answer to your question, I think there are many problems that need to be solved.
Are people scared, like users scared of their data? I think you, Johannes, with 37 Binary, the company you, I think, also founded, tried to humanize data or make it kind of more understandable, because what Sophie also said was there's data, but you know, we have to make decisions out of data. Like, is the data something that people are scared about, and do we have to package it in a different way? You're still on mute, by the way.
Yeah, good point. So I think that sort of, again, has two sides to it. Number one, going back to what Sophie said just now, the physician with it, or the healthcare professional within the healthcare system, right? The typical experience is that every time as a human, you have to enter patient data into a system in a structured way. It is painful, right? We humans are just not made for talking data, right? We talk natural language, and that's what physicians do too, right? So in the healthcare system, either the data comes from a machine, right? Like a lab result, or a CT scan, like imaging or something like that. Or if it comes from a physician, it's typically not structured very well, right? And even if it is structured, it's low quality, right? Let's face it. So physicians, that's what Sophie said too, they find it painful to enter data, and I totally understand it, right? So to actually alleviate this fear, I think the human-computer interface for entering data in healthcare has to be improved significantly, like natural language processing in healthcare, understanding, creating data from natural language on the flow, integrated into the physician's workflow, things like that. The other side is the patient, right? Is the patient scared of data? Maybe a little bit, right? So Dominic's mentioned German data privacy fears as a general Damocles sword sort of hanging around. And I think that is true, but it's especially true because it sounds so complicated, and regulations sound so complicated. And every other time as a patient or as an individual, we feel somebody's just dragging us over the table and just stripping our pants down when we trust them with our data, right? And I mean, in our daily lives, it's basically happening all the time, right? Big tech companies just collect our data, right? And at some point we click OK to some extended privacy statement, right? But we basically allow them to collect our data. And we also actually already allow them to collect health-related data, right? So I think there's a big wave of health-related applications that will be coming up over the next years, based on the data that we're already spreading, right? That is already being collected by companies out there, and who we actually signed up for it being okay for them to collect our data. But we're not aware of it. And I think this non-awareness actually creates a certain skepticism too.
Yeah, I still remember I did a genomic testing because I'm from a family that has a lot of history on cancer, and every single family member said, I don't want to know. And I was the only one that raised the hand and said, I really, really want to know, because, you know, prevention is something that you know, not just saves lives, but also the complete healthcare ecosystem can save a lot of money based on that. And again, I know, turning back to the hackathon and also young startups, I think everybody is trying to get access to data, and, you know, also to maybe prove and validate an idea. And I wonder also, you know, thinking about the people that listen in and think about entering a hackathon that is data science driven. How do I get access to data? Like if I'm a very early stage kind of team and I try to figure out, you know, how do I do that? You know, what are the partnerships? What are the sources? Besides me as you know, being my own patient and maybe providing my own data, Any clues and any tips for the people out there that think about entering the hackathon and really rely on data, to maybe bring a healthcare startup idea to life?
So there is actually healthcare data available on the internet, right? Especially English language stuff. So I'm not really aware of any good data sets in German, but there is data available in English language. So most of the time you actually have to apply for it and you have to promise that you're not going to do anything bad with it. But for example, the MIMIC data set from the Beth Israel Hospital in Boston is a huge data set of intensive care patients, and you can actually apply for access even if you're not a research institution. And I've heard of companies actually looking to start projects on this data set who have successfully applied for access to the data set. Other options, especially if you're targeting the German healthcare market, are to try a collaboration with a healthcare institution, right? So, and I think the main key here is not only to look for big research-oriented hospital institutions, but also to look across different sectors of the healthcare system, right? So like hospitalized healthcare is only one sector, but we also have networks of GP practices and things like that that collect data all the time. And some of them are actually very interested in collaborating for developing digital solutions.
Yeah, I think it's also one
maybe
of the
Dominic
topics
has
you
an
have been,
interesting clue on that
I
too.
think Dominic has, I think this is one of the key topics you have been worked on in the last 6 months to, find the right people that want to share data and also connect them with the people that really need data to turn them into something meaningful.
Yeah, and just to what Johannes just said, I think it's a super valid point, because we historically we have been focusing a lot on big institutions, on data. And this comes a lot because there have been existing connections to people doing research that's usually be done at large institutions, and then there was an infrastructure also in place, and these hospitals were more knowledgeable on data rights and how to share data, and everything has evolved over the last 10, 20 years already, that there is a possibility to have access to some of these data. But I believe, as Johannes said, there's really true value in the residential setting. If you just go on like potentially a number of data points, you would even exceed, I think, the hospital setting. If you just go on residential doctors, it's of course much harder in terms of go-to-market, because you don't have to go to 20 big hospitals, but you have to go to 20,000 private practices maybe, and you might need to think a bit about a different way to do it than to just go there. But in general, yeah, there's absolutely, I think, the need for these kind of data and making use out of it. So also to think back about what I would suggest a startup who's thinking about getting access to this data. I mean, there's collaborations with medical institutions. So in the end, it's always the most powerful stakeholder is always going to be the one who actually has the data. That's, I think, it. And then the next one is the one who's really able to analyze these data. And for analysis, I would always suggest that people, as early as possible, go out and to think about use cases, because there's a lot of data and there has been a lot of analysis. And then after you do this for 2 or 3 years, you find out actually nobody, or there's very limited interest in what you've done. So the earlier you can go and speak to people who, so I have a bit of this research background, so I'm always having this medical point of view. There's no use in data without having a use case. And so when you initially speak to the data holders, the hospitals or the dental physicians, or another startup that is focusing solely on data acquisition, but does not want to do itself the data analysis. So then you have your data bucket. And then I think at the same time, you should already start speaking to the ones who will eventually use the data, like, for example, medtech or pharma companies, or any other one who's involved in the research field, to speak to them, to kind of, as a sparring partner, to understand whether they have a use in this data.
I think it also is quite interesting, because you say, you have to go to this person and you have to talk and also I open the doors. I think it highly depends also if everybody involved understands the power of data. And I think Elena said it in the beginning. She said, I think in 2024, I was like 20, 40, 50, 100% of everybody will be data native. Is that something that we discuss now? You know, the ethical part of data, the accessibility of data. In like 10 years from now, will everybody be happy to share data? Because we are moving into the direction where artificial intelligence becomes normal. We have something like blockchain that gives you the impression that data is tracking and traceable. We have more data, data surrounding us. You mentioned that, Johannes, and said, hey, since we have Facebook, people are aware what can happen with data. Is it just a question of time? And in 10 years from now, we don't even talk about that anymore because it's so natural to have access?
Yeah, so I think where we want to go, at the moment, data usage is still very much project-based. So somebody defines a specific project, and you have a project team, you make use of this data. And I think this kind of holistic, constant use of data that we see in other systems, like, for example, when you look at the financial systems nowadays, you cannot imagine it without constant algorithm behind the data, running, analyzing, making the decisions. We do not see that in the healthcare system yet. So at the moment, you have, and as I said before, there's this kind of the defined use cases. Then you have a project that analyzes this data. And when we look in the future, and in 10 years, I believe we might already be on the way there, that we think of a more continuous usage of this. And then once all data rights are being clarified, we could come to a system where use cases could just be the overall health improvement through basically constant gathering of predefined factors. And I think there's, as always in these kind of tech evolutions, is you have consecutive streams running at the same time. So I think on the one hand side, you have the technological capability by systems to actually track your data constantly. You have watches or all kind of devices that help you to constantly monitor your health and your data. Then on the other hand, you have, Johannes already mentioned, and Sophie also, the AI systems that are being improved constantly to make use of this data. And then on the third bucket is a regulatory framework that allows all of this. So once I think when they, and probably the tech column is the one furthest evolved at the moment, and the regulatory one is the lowest one. But if you all have all of them coming above a certain threshold, you would come to a system where you have this kind of constant data analysis in the healthcare system.
I think you, Johannes, mentioned also Israel being quite open and sharing sensitive in terms of data, and they provide data. You, Sophie, work with partners in all these different countries. Is there a country we would say, hey, this is a good example, and let's look into that, and get ideas and maybe apply certain technologies also for the German or the European market?
Perhaps. So I have to admit, since we work internationally, we don't have super deep knowledge into each of the healthcare systems. So probably, whatever I'm saying now doesn't do justice to different countries and what they've built already. But from what we've seen is that, for example, in Sweden, that patients have much better access, digital access to their data, and also across delivery types. And what I mean by that is, kind of being able to combine your prescription data with your lab data, with your doctor data, so across different healthcare deliverers, for example. So I'd like to just give this as an example. I don't know whether this is the best or there are better ones or not, but definitely, to just also answer your question, there are countries out there who have better systems in place than Germany. I think Germany is one of the most fragmented places in the Western world of healthcare data. And I think one part that kind of has been missing in this discussion right now is that data can often only be meaningful or meaningfully used if you have an endpoint designed. And what is missing everywhere in the world right now is a big part of data that is not even being collected right now, and that is outcome data or patient-reported data. So, when you think about, okay, what data is there? So you think about insurance data, you think about hospital data, and all of it. So all of it is very transactional. We know how many, what people get prescribed. We know how many surgeries are being done, and all of that. But and I always come from the patient perspective, because I want to be able to connect what is being done with what is actually the outcome, and how can we actually use that data to make it better. And I think this is also a very big missing point right now on being able to, what Dominic referred to, in having algorithms or systems in place that work independently to improve a certain system and improve outcome for their users. And then in healthcare, it's all of us, it's patients. We need to be able to then also find a way to close the loop and connect the dots and say, okay, in the real world environment, what is the result of a certain action? And here I haven't really seen a system that does it really, really well. So when you think about how drugs are being introduced, they go through clinical studies and then it's out there. And then it's really, really clunky to actually see how those drugs are efficient and in the real world. And I know there are systems in place where pharma companies and all of it are still tracking it, but it could be so much better. And I think that's another thing that need to be solved, so we can get to a point where we actually collect a lot of data that we can then use for a meaningful way for all of us.
I think you touched on the point that the role of the patient is also changing by providing data, but also having the right to be involved in the complete journey. I just recently read that whenever somebody goes to the doctor and they show you like an X-ray or stuff like this, they explain, people go home and start to Google because they didn't understand it. It's hard. I think it starts with understanding the value and the worth of the data. It is also getting a better understanding what is behind the data, as you said. And at the end, if you also have the value and the worth of the data, kind of what is my right? Can I request to have certain data also presented to me in a different way? But I think especially education in terms of data from all different sides, I think it's still lacking. And this is, I think, one of the missing elements as well. And in general, I think it starts also at the university and it ends in the real world, being a patient. What would be for you, Johannes? You also, I think, coming from the science, having a biomedical background, I think, and then you moved into computer science, and it feels like you come from like the area where data is available and you work with a lot of research data, then into a space where you try to make use and find technology solutions to actually process all that data. From a technical point of view, what is missing in the complete data discussion from an accessibility point of view? Do we have everything? We have quantum computing, we have 5G coming, we have blockchain. We talk about AI, like what is missing from a technical background to actually make it work? Can you answer these blockchain, AI, and buzzword questions?
Yeah, let's skip the blockchain thing. I think the fun answer to this question is what is missing is the data, right? So, that's why we're actually sitting here, right? So there's data all over the place, but it's just not all in one place and working together so you can actually run analysis over all your health data, right? So, the great thing, or what would be awesome to have in 10 years of time, is an electronic patient record owned by the patient, right? That actually has structured data, and that whenever you go to the hospital, to any healthcare provider, via standards communications and interoperability means, that data is transferred into your personally owned electronic patient file, right? Plus all the data that you collect in health 4.0 applications, right? All the stuff you have on your smartphone, your Amazon shopping cart list, your travel record, all that stuff that actually is health relevant data can be collected into this electronic patient file too. So you as a patient, as an individual, you don't even have to be a patient. You as an individual have all your data in one place in a structured, interoperable way, so that you can then just like go to a patient data app store and either download your German DIGA or another application that you paid $2.99 for, which is, let's say, quality assured in the best case, that actually runs an analysis on top of all your data, on top of all your aggregated healthcare data, and tells you valuable insights about your personal health, your personal prevention, things like that. And if you want to, you can click on a share button, possibly enabled by blockchain, that will then transfer this data into a central storage space, possibly anonymized, to allow a research institution or a startup or somebody from the industry who maybe pays you cash for it, to use your data to build new algorithms, new value creating IT systems, things like that, right? So but as a core, there has to be one central place where you as a patient, as an individual, can collect all your data. And that is what's missing, right? So this one place where you actually get your data, the data is missing. Interoperability, actually. I mean, even though there are standards out there and they've been there for a long time, right? But they're not used in a widespread enough way.
So if I want to do it, where can I get started? You know, I'm happy to collect all the data, even if I know that they come from different sources. I most likely would start collecting all the paperwork that I have right now that, you know, is handed out to me in big envelopes that I carry around when I have a check done, you know, with a comment, please take it to your doctor. We will also send some message to the doctor, but, you know, carry it. And then I put it away. I don't find it anymore. Can I, as a patient, like do something? Because electronic health records have been discussed for quite a while, and it looks like as a patient, you kind of sit on the side, you're a little bit powerless to do your share. Like, what can I do as a patient to create? Because I also want to share my data, because I think my data is valuable, not for free necessarily, but also to encourage you know, developers, young entrepreneurs, startups to use the data to create something meaningful. If I'm, as a patient, I'm not in the position to actually do something, because I know, especially here in Berlin, there are a lot of very interesting young companies that are just waiting for the data, and I, as a patient, also want to contribute.
So I think the most important thing that we as individuals can do is to ask for the data whenever it is collected, right? So wherever our health data is recorded, we can ask for an ideally interoperable export of that data to take it with us, right? So basically to create a need for the institution to actually enable such exports, right? So if nobody wants their data, then I wouldn't actually export it either, right?
It sounds very simple. What, like, again?
That's it. I mean, the point is.
Go ahead.
So, I mean, the thing is, nobody, not even somebody who's as enthusiastic about it as me, right? Nobody wants to manually collect their health data, right? I mean, you just don't do that. You want the health data that is being collected by machines, by physicians, by your smartphone, by your watch, whatever. You want that to be automatically transferred to some central location, right? I don't want to, I mean, there are people, really awesome people, who just enter their medication information manually into a smartphone app, right? And then there's a physician at the hospital who will actually have this list read to them and who will manually enter it into 2 different systems at the very same hospital in one occasion, because these systems don't, whatever, right? So that's currently what's happening, right? But we don't want to do that. And that doesn't scale well either. We want a click that transfers data from one place to the other. And I think to actually make this happen, we as patients need to ask for it, right? And the fun thing about the transformation that the healthcare system is going through right now is that we as individuals are being put into the driver's seat, right? So for as long as the healthcare system exists, the physician was in the driver's seat, right? The physician was the individual's interface to the individual's health, right? But that's changing, right? So the internet has brought with it information. So we're responsible for being informed. We Google everything, and AI is actually bringing with it decision, right? So the decision is being, let's say, I don't want to say free, but I'm a physician too, so I can say it, is actually being liberated from the physician's ownership and being given to the patient, right? Of course, it's always good to ask your physician before you do anything unwise, but still, AI will actually allow the patient to make decisions or to be suggested certain decisions based on their data, right? So this transition puts you as a patient, you as an individual, into the driver's seat of healthcare, right? It's not only the established stakeholders that are driving healthcare, that are coming up with regulation, coming up with decisions about what's a good app and what's not. It's us as individuals who will be making these decisions, right? And if we, as the driver, as the people who will be paying for this too, actually want interoperability, if we want our data, and if we express this, then I think it will happen. Because at the end of the day, the company that wants to sell something to you, wants to sell you their application, will actually have to make their application work in a way that you actually want to install it. And if you want interoperability from the application you install, and you only install those applications that provide it to you, then that's actually quite a big lever you have.
It sounds a little bit like we have to cut the physician off in the middle.
No. That's not what I'm saying. That's why I said you always should ask your physician. I think it will make the physician's role, and I mean, that's being something that's been talked about a lot, right? So I think it will make the physician's role much more human again than it has been for a long time, right? So right now, the physician is the data processor of the healthcare system, right? They have to process all the data in their head. They have to enter that data into the computer system, again, painful, right? And so they're basically your patient computer system decision interface, right? But if a lot of this data processing is actually done automatically, and the data is like the data is being put out of the way because it's just there, right? And you as a patient are being suggested a decision by a computer system, then you can actually go to your doctor and talk to them about this suggestion and make a joint decision, right? Actually, in the area of evidence-based medicine, there is the concept of shared decision-making, right? Where it's not actually the physician who makes the decision, but it's the physician together with the patient who decides upon the best treatment, right? And I think this concept is going to be super important in the future. The shared decision-making between the patient and the physician they trust on a human level.
It's interesting that you mentioned the trust on the human level, because we have a question in the chat from Aditik that also mentioned data literacy among patients. It creates more trust into the entire process and leads to a better outcome. How important is data literacy among the patients? I think you also mentioned it, Sophie, that the role of the patients, coming in from the back, also understanding what can I contribute to make the healthcare system better, but how much do I have to learn, or how much do I have to educate the patients across the world so they can take on this role?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and that's a really good point, right? Like, I think as a human being, you're always afraid of something. You're always afraid of the unknown, or you're always skeptical of the unknown. And I think, the headline data or data privacy is always kind of what a lot of people are concerned about. And I think part of it is it's because data literacy, or kind of the transparency on what is meant by something is not given. And it starts with understanding your own data. And by understanding your own data, you also understand what it means, and what you can do with it or not do with it. And I think that is, again, a multifaceted problem, because so I think one of either Johannes or Dominic mentioned that before, and I experienced this myself as well. When my parents go to the doctor, they come back and they call me and ask me about their lab reports, and I was like, why don't you ask your doctor? And they always say, you're a doctor. I was like, but I don't work I'm like a fake doctor. But really, this is what happens all the time, right? Like, people don't understand what is happening. Also, the same happens with me with the difference that I can actually look at whatever is happening with me, and I understand my data. And I think a big part, and that goes beyond healthcare data. I think data literacy in general as a topic for the general society is becoming increasingly important, and not just what does it mean, but what is happening. And that's why we see, like, as a normal user, I have no idea what type of data is being collected by Google and Facebook. Like, I kind of can imagine, but I really truly don't know what kind of data points are being collected, right? And therefore, for me, it's really, really hard to judge on whether I like it or not, or what I want to do with it. And so you can put this into many, many categories in day-to-day life. So yeah, data literacy is going to be super important now and in the future more so.
I still struggle with the concept of how much do I have to actually learn about like medical data to make it work, especially if I see that we are not really learning, but we understand how to learn or how to find information at the end in the internet. And I hope, and this is, I think, one of the curation elements that you always have to do, to also find the right trusted source that can help you to interpret the data that you might have. By the way, I have the same situation. My parents also call me up and say, you work somehow in IT in a startup, you must be able to fix a laptop. It's always the case. And I like that you said I'm a fake MD. Believe me, running a company, and I think you have been CEO of Qunomedical for 5 years now. This is something that is as challenging as working as a GP. Any more question? Because I think we also have just a couple of seconds left before we join your tribe. I'm not quite sure, Elena, if we have a hard cut at 5, or we can keep chatting.
You can talk a little bit more if you want to. I mean, we don't have a hard cut. No, you have time to talk for a bit. Yeah. If you want to. If there's anything else that you'd like to discuss, or any other question that is from the audience.
Haven't seen any other questions from the audience. Let's check. I think we all agreed on the data literacy. I think it's a super cool topic, but again, I think this is a completely hard, kind of huge project to kick off. I really am interested in, if we talk about data accessibility and, who did a good job. And I think you, Sophie, with Qunomedical, you've been, working for such a long time, successful for 5 years now. You definitely cracked it, and you have access to the right data. Otherwise, I think it wouldn't work. Like, any tips and tricks, you said you found workarounds in the beginning, you created your own system. Any tips for entrepreneurs and data scientists out there, how to kind of do a detour and become successful?
Well, I think what's most important, I think Johannes said this before, is like, ask for the data that you need. No matter if it's your own data. So for example, for us, the question is also, how can we make doctors comparable internationally? Right? Like, how do we tell that this doctor in, I don't know, in Turkey is as legit as a doctor in Germany as somebody in the US? So, and we want to do this in a very data-driven way. And what we do to a large extent, so we use publicly available data as much as we can, but we will fill the gaps by going up to the doctors or the hospitals and ask them for the specific data sets that we need in order to do our work. And I think, for entrepreneurs, don't sit there and wait until it's being made available to you until, you know, it's there. Sometimes you just gotta go and get it yourself.
Dominic, I was quickly sidetracked by reading a message in the chat. Is there a solution that you think, hey, they cracked the access to precious healthcare data? Like, is there anything you see on the market you say, hey, this is the way to go, like a blueprint?
I mean, I think it's probably a bit what Johannes also mentioned earlier in terms of really having the access to the source of the data. I mean, most of us probably heard about the Flatiron example that I think did this extremely well in a couple of years ago already, where they really thought, okay, where is the biggest source for data? And then they directly thought about also not just where's the biggest source of the data, but also where's the biggest need for the data. And then also to think about the value proposition for each stakeholder in the healthcare system. I think these are all relevant factors that you really need to think about beginning directly. Now, when it comes to literacy, I think what we will see in the future now is, I mean, Sophie mentioned before, there's a huge gap now for patient-reported outcomes. I think we will absolutely see that skyrocketing now, data availability is patient-reported outcomes, just because regulations also more and more look at these data from the real-world evidence setting and from patients in order to make decisions on pricing for drugs, for example. That's going to be a very big driver for which data is needed. I mean, in the end, especially when we talk about pharma, the data is most needed that has the biggest value when it comes to price negotiations. And then when it comes on the other side, also to what Johannes mentioned, the data for shared decision-making, I think we have seen a lot of startups that are doing quite well, and then also now the big tech players are entering there to constantly have the ability to monitor the patient. And when we speak about literacy, the next successful companies will be the ones who really help explain the patient also. If we put the patient in the driver's seat, we really need to make sure. I mean, we already see nowadays that patients, just by Googling things, they get crazy sometimes unnecessarily. And I'm sure when you do genetic testing and everybody has a genomic profile, I'm sure all of us have one gene, at least one genetic mutation that will lead with certain probability to cancer. And if people are not necessarily literate on this, and the startups that help communicate this to the patients, they will be the ones who are successful in also getting the right patient footprint there to not scare patients and people off.
Any last remark, Johannes? You know, apparently you touched on a lot of interesting topics because Dominic and Sophie and I, we were kind of referring to a lot of things we talked about. Anything more? You're still on mute, by the way.
I was just reaching for the pointer. No, I think, I mean, Dominic and Sophie gave some really good final comments, I think. I mean, and I think we've touched a lot of important topics in this panel. If there's one thing I would like to say, everybody who is going into digital health, right, and is creating software or is already using software and developing software, implement interoperability into your product, right? Go check standards. So, I mean, FHIR, SNOMED, HL7, LOINC, there are standards out there that actually help you structure your data in a good way and that actually allow you to transfer the data to other people in a meaningful way. So don't just leave that for later when the patient comes asking, but do it yourself.
And you also have to say, because you mentioned DIGA and certification, it needs to be transparent and in a way also trackable and traceable. So if you have a quality management system, if you kind of have to clean up after 2 years of working on some ideas, and then you have this kind of huge set of data and you suddenly try to make kind of something out of it, A lot of data is not necessarily helpful, especially if you try to clean up. I would actually always recommend to start with a smaller data set and go step by step and kind of structure it in the right way, because I just know how hard it is if after 2 years you try to make sense out of your data and you structure your data and put a quality management system on top. Gosh, data is, bam. It's hard to control.
Totally. Actually, DIGA will require interoperability.
Yeah.
Right? So, but everybody who's not going for DIGA should still do it.
Very good last words. Good, Elena. I think we move on and we'll have the individual sessions. So everybody can basically also ask Johannes, Sophie, and Dominic individually. I think everybody has a different profile and touches on different topics. And you might have very individual questions. So use the tables to find Johannes, Sophie, and Dominic, talk to them, ask your questions, and get started and get a head start into how to access the right data if you want to form a healthcare company, so you're well prepared for the hackathon that is coming.
Thank you so much for the panelists. Thank you very much, Maren, for moderating. Very interesting discussion. And as you said already, a lot of interdisciplinary backgrounds, pretty much complementing each other. So yes, you will all be right now, all the speakers except for Maren, she's going to stay for 5 more minutes. We'll go to the YoTribe link. So any more questions from the participants, please go ahead and ask them there. And now I will, as already Maren said, we are going to start the Hackathon Info Day part. So healthcare actually is a very big part of the hackathon, which is why we also combined this together. As we mentioned at the beginning, we did do a lot of sessions, a lot of hackathons this year on the topic of healthcare because of what has been happening in the world, in case you didn't notice. But now let me share my screen with you for a minute. I'm gonna start another presentation. Again, thanks for all the panelists. You are free to go. Let me present. Can you see my my slides?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you, Maren. All right, so yes, so as I said, it's the Hackathon Info Day now starting. You just met me before, so I'm not gonna go on for long right now. I actually want to pass the torch to Maren, who was the moderator of the previous panel discussion, and Philip Lang, Maren from Vision Health Pioneers, and Philip from Bayer, to give an introductory, to make also welcome to the hackers, since you're both in a way involved. So please, Philip, hi. Can you hear us?
He's on mute.
Okay. He's on mute.
And I tried to unmute myself. Am I successful now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, hello, and a warm welcome also on behalf of Bayer. I mean, we were already part of the hackathon against Corona a couple of months ago, and I think this was a really intense and exciting experience that we had there. And so, yeah, we're really happy to join this hackathon too here. As you probably know or may not know, at Bayer we have a pretty strong vision, which is health for all, hunger for none. And we are deeply convinced that we need data and technology to achieve this goal. And this is why we're so happy to work with you, all of you here together on these very important topics, where we can really make a difference for humankind, for our world. And I think this is really something that is exciting for all of us. And so we're happy to get this started, and let's rock it.
Yes, thank you very much, Philip. And my pleasure partnering with you again for this hackathon, having a lot of mentors and supporting the teams, juries, and potentially seeing some of the ideas to fruition. And Maren again as well with Vision Health Pioneers. Please introduce yourself for this part.
Yeah, I just moderated the panel on health and accessibility, so some of you might have seen you. And yes, why are we supporting hackathons? Vision Health Pioneers and Incubator. So we help very early stage companies. We have 7 in our current batch, and we are currently recruiting for the second batch that is going to start in January. We share public funding, which usually is quite nice. So we prepare companies to get started and start the entrepreneurial journey. And then we are glad to work with companies like Bayer and other companies to make it easy then when you have a little traction to actually start talking to the larger organizations. Why am I a huge fan of hackathons? Because I know it works. We have one company in our current batch that actually came from a hackathon, met for the first time, took the time to actually work on their ideas, really, really in a dense environment, talk to mentors, reshape the idea, and really keep the energy up. So after a couple of months, they applied for the incubator. They have now been part of the incubator for 8 months. We are at the end of the first cohort. They're still going strong, and they came out of a hackathon. We also supported a couple of hackathons in the beginning of the year and handed out some wildcards. There are still companies that did hackathons with data natives and Bayer in March that we are talking to, and they are interested in entering the incubator and shaping their healthcare ideas. So it is a great opportunity to get started. Sometimes you need a kick, and sometimes you need the right partners, and sometimes you only have to understand what great ideas are in your head and you have to get them out, and it's a great idea to do it. So we are very happy to support. If there are any cool healthcare ideas developed in the hackathon time in the next few weeks, let us know, reach out to us, so you can jump directly into the ideation workshop we have as part of our selection phase. And again, it's never a bad time to start a company. It's never a bad time to actually work on the idea that you have been maybe mulling around in your head for quite a while. And healthcare is just something that never gets old. It's very, very good. It keeps you grounded, and it's very self-fulfilling if you create something in healthcare, because we just talked about it in the previous session. It impacts everybody. It's sustainable, it's good, and people care. So very happy to support, very happy to look into the results. And it's great that Bayer is on board, because you need supporters from all different areas, and having such an experienced team is never bad. Use these opportunities as well.
Thank you very much.
These are my kind of 2 cents.
Very,
I'm hooked and I love it.
Very helpful and motivated. I agree with you for sure. Like that's exactly what we're doing hackathons, because they work. And also data is right now really important, especially in healthcare, as we talked already in the panel, as you talked in the panel. So really, we want to make the best of it. So thank you so much both for joining us, joining forces and supporting this hackathon, and supporting actually the entrepreneurs coming out of the hackathon. And I think like it's very motivating to see what hackathons can do and exactly give this extra push to the teams to form, to meet other people, to sharpen their ideas, and to get even access to network that they wouldn't otherwise had to, like mentors and get initial feedback. So thank you. Now we'll move forward to the challenges that we actually have for this hackathon. We have identified 4. 2 of them are very much healthcare focused, actually maybe even 3, even in the third. Generally speaking, because of the times that we're facing, one challenge that I think we really noticed and we really would like to and I've also seen from other hackathons I participate that a lot of people having ideas is how can we build actually sustainable businesses during the economic unrest. This is certainly something that we would need more help with. Yes, there's never a bad time to do a business. Yes, actually, if anything, any challenge can be an opportunity, but still we need to have the right foundations for this. So we're looking for teams with ideas and also potentially existing products to tell us how to do it. Another challenge, of course, is long-term and positive social impact. So how can tech help us with this? and how can, I mean, the foundations of our society are more and more important, especially now we've been through a year of unrest and a lot of, let's say, remote and isolated self-isolation, people in self-isolation and forming remote intimacy connections. But still, how can we actually find a way to, through these difficult times and outside of these difficult times, to have to use tech for good in a positive and long-term benefits for the society. In healthcare, very relevant and very similar to the topic that was discussed in the panel before, what are the ways to enact both healthcare and data accessibility for all? I think the conversation always starts with data should be, all the users should have the right to delete their data. We're always starting with regulating, but we also know that we do need access to data. So this is something very, very important, because without data, a lot of projects cannot move on. So how can we ensure that both are in place? And how to ensure cybersecurity and data protections in the times of exponential growth of data. That's also something that we thought as a challenge. That's something that we really looked into. And of course, as a fifth challenge, anything that you would like to include. Regulation and data protection is quite important, and at the same time, having like a system of a digital system where there will be let's say a smoother process for the digital economy, it's necessary. Any other ideas that you might have and you would like to challenge them, bring them forward. So your hackathon journey. So as a hacker, your journey starts today. We basically have the info session today. So I'm now giving you more information about the structure, the challenges, the resources and the tools that we have from Zoom to your tribe. There's also the period of team formation and hacking. You can sign up, and important information, you can sign up until September 23rd. As long as you come with a complete team. You can form your team either by meeting on Slack and on Airtable. We will give access now to all people to find teammates on Airtable. And then you can sign up through your team through Airtable. Then you need to create a Slack channel with your team, which will be used as the main communication. And then it's the time for you to work out your solutions. Then between the 24th and the 25th, we're going to have the mentorship sessions. That means that all the mentors that are currently available to consult you on your ideas will be there on those 2 dates to meet with you and to look over whatever you would like to look over with. We will also have expert workshops focusing on different topics, from pitch training workshops to design thinking workshops, how to structure your business plan, how to structure your canvas and so forth. And what you would need to do in order to be eligible to pitch on the demo day on the 26th is to submit your project on DevPost by September 25th at midnight. Then we will have the demo day on the 26th, where you can pitch your project to the jury, and the winners will be announced in November. So there's a long way, but as already Myron mentioned, there's a lot of things in the process, and you can always win something along the way. Of course, like the official announcement to everybody would be made in November. Some of the winners will already know some of the perks if it is relevant to what they're winning. So let's start and have a little bit of a tour around what we are going to be using. We're using Slack as the main communication tool during the hackathon. So if you haven't already, please join Slack. The way to communicate on Slack, please make comments. When you make a comment, start a thread to continue the conversation in order to minimize overload. Make sure to tag the people that you are talking to, and please don't tag the whole channel if it's not absolutely necessary. Sidebar, edit your settings to only show the shared channels and the ones that you're interested in, and anything that has pending mentions in direct messages. The main channels of communication, we have A1, announcements. By the way, the reason why we decided to include them with these ways to actually make it easier to navigate in terms of channels. So the announcement channel is A1, all important announcements are made there. The channel directory is A2, where you can find an overview of all channels that you would like to join, and there's the help desk. So you can use that to ask the organizers anything. Please don't spam as much as you can. Continuing, how you can get connected on Slack. You can find mentors. All the mentors will be in a Slack channel, and they will present themselves, and you can go and directly talk to them. You can find a team. If you're looking for like-minded people, you can put your question and your challenge. Depending on the topics, we have divided it in different categories. We've got sustainability and green business. We've got social impact, healthcare and data accessibility, and cybersecurity and data protection. If you're looking for teammates, that's an idea of how you can communicate this. Tell us your team name, the project idea, the skills, and what kind of skills you're looking for. You can also use Airtable to find people, but that will be later. Airtable actually would be given to you with all the information of everybody who applied on the type form, and then you can find people and match and create teams there. Intro to Slack. So once you find a team and sign up for a challenge, it is mandatory to create public team channels in Slack. Why is that? So that we can always go there, find you, and talk with you. Otherwise, we might not be able to find you. Of course, the most important person for us to know is the team lead. This is the person that we should absolutely have direct contact with. Please use the following logic for naming convention. So C and then the team name. Team and then team name. By the way, all this information that I'm now pouring in your brain will also be shared. So don't worry if you miss something. I'm also seeing a lot of messages, which I don't even have time to look at. So if you are talking to me, I will address your questions at the very end. So other channels. There is the D1 Hack Random, where, if you need to decompress a little bit or you would like some time to chill, you can go and post funny memes about the world. That was definitely very effective during Corona times and lockdown. The selfie channel, well, we're not together in the same room, so it will be good if we share with each other selfies of us working, or put some actually challenges. Maybe that could be an idea that we will do next week. Challenges to share selfies with a specific theme, and generally be able to come together. Of course, that can also be from your team meetings and your mentorship sessions, so we know how far ahead you are, and to be there with you along the journey. Airtable, I mentioned it before. So the Airtable is also very, very useful, as much as Slack. Essentially, all the people who have applied for this hackathon, and we have about 500 of them, they are there. So if you're looking for people to team up, these are your people. You can go and see who has already applied, and you can start a conversation with them. You can join a team by finding existing teams on Teamtable. And if you would like to contribute and or join the hacking team, you can write them a message in the chat or contact the team captain on Slack. You can look for teams in the topic channels on Slack. You can create a new team by Airtable. Once you set the form, your team will be added automatically to the team table. This will also mean that unless you will send us a message, you are the team captain. So be careful what you're promising there, be careful what you're doing, because if you're the one submitting, you are the leader. So you better want to. It's not a bad thing, it's just a thing. So speaking of leaders, team captains.
those other leaders. They are the captains of the team, or the sheep, however you want to put it, or the laptop, or whatever you have. So each team should have a team captain. The main responsibility is to ensure smooth communication. So a team captain needs to have it together and needs to be able to communicate very well with his team. No stress. You shouldn't be the main coder. You shouldn't be necessarily the idea creator. You just need to be able to get people together. So you need to communicate with your team, create team channel. You need to communicate with us and communicate with your mentors. So it's important that you are the main contact person for us and for everybody in this organization. And intro to GitHub, we already went over. You formed your team, you are on Slack, everything is set, you're working on your idea, and you want to start submitting. You want to start informing us about it. Not start, but you're already actually in the process of submitting, and you have like developed a super lean, very clean, very beautiful line of code, and you want to share it to the world, and you can, because you're using GitHub. So what is GitHub? Is a file management system. So it supports distributed productivity and speed, and Git helps the user maintain responsibility. And actually, speaking of data privacy and data protection, actually you are able with GitHub to have let's say the patronage and like the ownership of your code. So that's super, super important in order to persevere the rights. And after you submit, no one can come and claim that they've had the idea first or they coded it first. So how can you use GitHub? Well, you can participate in joint projects. Actually, you can also go and copy other people's codes and be able to use it in open source projects, of course. You can return to an older version if something happens, so you can use it actually before you finally submit. So you can use it as a storage without affecting the current state of the files. And in general, it will be very, very helpful for you to use it. So we actually afterwards, after the demo day, we can see, the jury can see and assess who is what, how, especially the technical people in the jury committee, how exactly, like whether what you created makes sense. Now, as we already said, this is like a very good way for you through a hackathon to get access to a network and to mentors that you normally wouldn't. Basically, what a hackathon is like a ticket, a speed-fast ticket for you to get a glimpse inside, let's say, an accelerator program or an incubation, because you get access to mentors that usually are part of this type of programs, and they can really help you within a very limited amount of time, help you form your idea, sharpen your way of thinking, and overall see where you're going, and understand whether it makes sense or not. So we're using Mentornity for this. So that means that in that platform, you can book on Thursday and on Friday 30-minute slots with the mentors that we have available there. You can book meetings with them. Everything is very smooth, operated on Mentornity. You just go, you make your profile, and we will send you a link, and you will see all the mentors that are available and their time slots, and you can book a meeting with them, or you can request to book a meeting with them, and then they will have to accept it. So basically, the mentoring would happen through chats and video calls, and everything will happen through Mentornity. So, as I already said, but I will repeat it one more time to highlight how important mentorship is. Mentors basically are people with extensive experience in their fields, very specific fields. They can come from communications, legal, tech, data science. They can be coaches that help you with refining your business. They can be great communicators. They can be product people. So from all different kind of sectors, they are the ones who are they are experts in their domain, and they can support the participants in designing, shaping the basic idea and philosophy, and help with their knowledge during the sessions. How can they support you? With your business model, product development process, technology, and product. They can help you in all ways that you're shaping your idea, your company, depending on the level that it is.
And these are some of our mentors. So we are very, very lucky. As you already met in the previous discussion already, we have Johannes Starlinger. He's also going to be mentoring you. He has extensive experience as well when it comes to data science in healthcare. We also have Kristen Müller, who is the team lead at data generation from Bayer. And that is also great for any data scientist here or anyone with a data product that they would like to discuss. That's a rare opportunity. And people like Elif Kokoglu Ulbrich, who is a founder of an agency and especially specializing in legal tech and fintech. So that could be very useful for you from a legal perspective. Anisha Kargupta, who is a professor at the University of London. Dirk Mitte, who is the solution architect at SAP, just to name a few. There's more that are going to be added through the week. And of course, you will get to see all of them and meet all of them next week. We're also going to have a live session with the mentors next week, where you can get to meet them even outside the mentorship sessions. So Zoom and your tribe. Well, if you need really an intro to Zoom and you are in the Zoom link, then something is wrong. However, let me just give you a bit of an update how we are going to be using them. So we have Zoom and your tribe. Zoom is the place where we will have main meetings and demo day. Your tribe is the place where we're going to have networking and team meetings. You can access your tribe at any time. In fact, there's a link here, and after our hackathon info session day, you can access it and you can go and meet other participants, because this is what's the important thing about the info session day, to meet potentially other people that you would like to work with. You can access Zoom and your tribe via your member area on our Data Natives website. So a lot of things would also be on Data Natives website. We really want to do it as easy as possible. So whenever you're in doubt, just go back to the website, because everything would be there to redirect you. We try to use as less tools as possible to not to confuse you, and you can always find them on the website. Just you need to be able to access the member area. DevPost. This is where you'll be submitting your project. We really want you, and this is very important. So when you are submitting your project, you can come with an existing team. You don't have necessarily to form a team during the hackathon. When you are submitting your project at midnight, latest midnight on the 25th, no, midnight, like night 25th day, like it's like on the bridge of 26, basically 12 a.m. 26th. We need you for sure to submit a video no longer than 2 minutes. If you fail to comply on that, you'll be disqualified. We need you to submit it in English. Again, we need to be able to understand you. So English, no subtitles allowed. You should also upload it to YouTube at a public video. It can be listed if you want to. That would help us for the demo day. And we recommend structuring the video in 4 parts. We have the problem or the challenge, you providing the solution, and what happened in this time between identifying the challenge and the solution during this hackathon. So what you accomplish and what you're planning to do next. So why do we say that? Because we do actually really want to see that you've done something during this period, that actually this little sprint helped you. If you come with something that was developed before without taking any mentorship session, that will be a bit of an issue for us. We want you to work during the time of the hackathon. That's the point. So the demo day. Dun, 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 dun. So the demo day, it's going to be on the 26th. It's on a Saturday. It's running from midday, approximately midday, until 5 o'clock. That's the time that we blocked. We're not sure we're going to use all the time, but we don't know how many applications will be, and we want to be mindful of that. Also, we blocked that amount of time because we also plan to have a panel before and potentially some little party afterwards. So As we said at the beginning, we've already organized quite a few hackathons this year with partners such as Vision Health Pioneers and Bayer, and among others. And we really want to bring the people who participate in this hackathon to you to share their story, to inspire you. And our plan is to do that throughout the 3 days of the mentorship session. So from Thursday until Saturday, you're also going to get this kind of content. You're also going to get educational content to help you further your idea. And yeah, and in general, you're going to get the demo day, which is very important. And you want to be included. You don't want to be disqualified from the demo day. So that's why listen carefully on the evaluation criteria. We've got 5 different evaluation criteria. We've got innovation. So meaning, how innovative is the idea? Does the approach stand out from the solutions that are available? We're not expecting you to reinvent the wheel, but there should be some sort of innovation. Impact, very, very important, especially when it comes to healthcare. For example, how high is the benefit for the patient and other stakeholders of the healthcare system? What kind of impact is generated for the society with your solution? And actually, how viable is your solution? Is it just a wishful thinking that potentially could have been, applied in another universe, or can you actually really apply it? And that moves to applicability. So is it user-friendly, the solution? Is convenient to be used? Because a beautiful code for you might mean nothing for the user. Feasibility, how realistic is to implement the idea? Can the solution be brought into life? Is it just a research project or by founding a company? And execution, how sophisticated and well-made is the technical implementation? Don't you forget, we're still in a data science environment. It's a community of data scientists. So we really want you to showcase that you really know what you're doing with your data, or you really know how to present the solution in a technical way. So not just ideas, also in a form of a prototype. Some of our juries here and more are going to be added throughout the days. So we are lucky to have Max Wenger, who is the head of regulatory affairs at Bayer. As you know, and as I mentioned at the beginning, we are looking at the topic of regulation. So it's pretty important, and it's very good to have him with us. Alistair Nolan, who is the Administrator Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, specifically focusing on topics on AI. Lina Nikolopoulou, Managing Director of the eHealth Forum, also the representative of Hacking Health in Greece. Kirill Satanovsky, co-founder at Hacking Edu, and Albert Calvo, an AI researcher. And just to name a few, there are more judges adding every day, just for you to understand what kind of people you would need to impress with your solution. And that's actually pretty important. We will make sure to share with you the list of people that will be part of the jury, because it's also important to see it from their perspective. As we already mentioned, we're very, very happy, and thank you very much for joining me as well today here in this info session to have Bayer as partner, Vision Health Pioneers, and Flying Health. As I said, the winners will be announced publicly at the DN Unlimited conference, and let's hack this thing. So I've been seeing a lot of questions. Actually, okay, not that many, maybe just 2 questions. Let me see the questions. I'm gonna stop sharing for now. Okay. All right, so actually the questions were not, okay, that was not that was not a question for this session, so that's good. That means that you guys don't have that many questions. No, that's not true. Someone asked about the midnight. Yes, midnight Central European times. Yes, midnight on the 25th. Okay. All right. I think that we've answered most of the questions, because 2 of the questions here, they were specifically for the panel before, if I understand correctly. And the questions here was one about, hi Emilia, greetings from Germany as well. So excited to have you too. And I want to see here if there's any other questions. The guidelines are shared. What do you mean by the topic for the hackathon? You can place your own challenge if that's what you mean. All right, any other questions? It was a long presentation, actually. I thought it was shorter, but I see the time now. I think it probably was about 20, 25 minutes, wasn't it?
we had a longer panel in the beginning, I can tell you. And then, no, don't worry. I think it's it looks maybe complex, but the tools are actually very powerful. And I think once you get a handle in it, and especially now to navigate how to navigate Slack, just telling you because I've participated in a couple of hackathons, it looks complex, but it's a direct contact to all the mentors and everybody else. And I was always overwhelmed by the amount of communication that happens. I am on the other side of MentorMe as a mentor, super convenient. You click, you're in that session. You don't have to find a Zoom. You don't have to schedule. Just saying, it looks like all these tools are complex, but they are made for online activities like this. And if you wonder if an online hackathon works, it does because of all these tools.
Thank you, Maren, from the word for confidence.
Yeah.
One more thing to mention, actually, we've also gathered, as we said, data hackathon, and data is important. We also gathered loads of sources of open data for all the different challenges that we're tackling, and you can find them on the guidelines. So the guidelines have been shared here. You can look at the guidelines also from the website. If lost, if confused, always go to the website. That's the place you need to always return to. So yes, we have all the guidelines there, and we also have the data that you can use that will help you in the hackathon. Any other final comments from Maren or Philip?
No, just to wish good luck to everyone and rock the show, rock the hackathon.
Exactly. Yes, we will, Maria, Amelia, we will send you all the requirements to participate through the email. Yes, as well. Cool. All right, if there's no more questions, you guys can go and mingle on your tribe. Welcome as well. I think I'm gonna join now. And then we're gonna finish this session. All right, cool. Okay.